Jonathan Hale had never considered himself a man prone to superstition. He lectured on ancient history at Arkham University, teaching his students that myth was only the echo of ignorance, that behind every tale of gods and monsters lay politics, fear, and the failures of memory. He had catalogued relics, traced genealogies, and published articles that scorned the notion of supernatural forces. Yet the letter that arrived on a damp October morning unsettled him more than he cared to admit. The envelope was blotched with moisture, sealed in plain wax without crest or name. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, its edges rough, its ink smeared in hurried strokes. It was found near the wetlands, a mask of stone that breathes. They will not let me keep it much longer. Come if you value the truth. No signature, no return address beyond the postmark of a rural village he did not know well, buried in the swampy lowlands west of Arkham. Jonathan told himself he traveled for professional curiosity, that he was merely ensuring an artifact of potential historical value did not vanish into obscurity. But beneath the justification pulsed something less rational. The suspicion that the words had been written for him alone, that the mask had been waiting, and that he had already agreed to its summons the moment he read the page. The journey took half a day by train, rattling through leafless forests and sodden marshland. Villages grew smaller the farther he traveled, houses sagging beneath the weight of moss, fences leaning drunkenly into fields of stagnant pools. When he finally arrived, fog clung so thick to the air it blurred the crooked roofs into silhouettes. The streets were narrow and muddy, and the smell of wet earth carried the sourness of stagnant water. As Jonathan walked from the station, satchel heavy at his side, he felt the eyes of the townsfolk upon him. Faces peered from behind curtains, hands paused over carts of firewood. Children stared openly until their mothers yanked them away. No greeting was offered. No voice broke the silence. He adjusted his brown trench coat, tugged the brim of his fedora lower, and tried to ignore the way their gazes seemed less curious than accusatory, as though they recognized him already, as though they knew what he had come for. The inn where he found lodging was no warmer than the streets. The landlord accepted his payment without word and left him to a narrow room that smelled of mildew. The wallpaper peeled in long strips and the dampness clung to his lungs. Sleep did not come easily. The first hours of night brought footsteps along the corridor, though the inn was near empty. Once or twice Jonathan rose to peer into the hall, only to find it deserted. Then came the sound of water dripping into a basin, rhythmic and steady, until he crossed the room to check, only to find the basin bone dry. When at last his eyes closed, dreams pressed down with the weight of suffocation. He saw himself standing before a mirror, yet the reflection lingered when he turned away. In the gloom it smiled faintly, though his own lips remained still. Jonathan woke in a sweat, the mirror above the dresser looming in the lamplight, its glass dull and heavy. The next morning he forced himself onward. The library sat at the edge of town, a squat stone building draped in ivy, its door reluctant on its hinges. Inside, dust choked the air. Rows of neglected books loomed in shadow. And there, by the glow of a weak oil lamp, he met her. She was slight, her posture bent, her hands trembling as she lit the lamp. Her eyes darted to the door as though she feared discovery. Without introduction, she whispered, "You should not have come." Yet even as she said it, she beckoned him deeper, through corridors that smelled of rot and ink, into a room locked by iron bolt. There, upon a plain wooden table, lay the mask. It was carved from stone blacker than obsidian, yet slick as though damp. Its features were crude, two hollow eyes, a mouth twisted in what seemed a grimace. Jonathan circled it slowly, his breath shallow. For an instant, when viewed from the corner of his eye, the mouth seemed to shift, curving upward in a smile too mocking to be accidental. He blinked hard. The face was unchanged. The woman shuddered and pulled her shawl tight. "They come for it at night," she whispered. "They say it belongs to the swamp, not to us. It breathes in the dark. I cannot keep it safe." Jonathan reached out despite himself. The stone was ice cold, and for a fleeting moment he swore a chill exhalation brushed across his palm. He recoiled, heart pounding. Rationality clawed for purchase, condensation, imagination, fatigue. Yet the certainty that the mask had drawn breath remained like a brand in his thoughts. That night, he could not rest. Whispers filled the room whenever silence settled, voices layered one over the other, syllables he did not know yet comprehended. They spoke of division, of mirrors, of selves fractured and doubled. Twice he woke standing before the cracked mirror on his wall, his face gazing back with an expression he had not worn. The second time, the reflection smiled, slowly, deliberately. His own lips remained still. By dawn, exhaustion hollowed him. He knew he must follow the whispers, if only to prove to himself they had no power. With lantern in hand, he pushed into the swamp. The wetlands breathed rot and silence. Trees loomed like sentinels, their roots twisting through pools of stagnant water. Carvings scarred the bark in spirals and symbols too deliberate to be natural. He followed half-sunken footprints that led to a clearing ringed by ancient stones taller than a man, moss clinging to their surface. And there he saw them. Dozens of villagers robed in tattered cloth, their faces hidden behind masks carved crudely in imitation of the stone relic. They stood in a circle, voices weaving into a chant. The syllables scraped the air, too many layers to follow, until the very ground seemed to hum with their rhythm. At the circle's center lay a pool of water blacker than night. The chanting swelled. The surface of the pool trembled. Not with ripples, but with a rising gnat, as if the liquid defied gravity. Slowly it lifted, forming a vertical plane of liquid that shimmered like polished glass. A mirror suspended above the earth, pulsing in time with the chant. Jonathan's knees weakened, for within the surface, staring back with perfect clarity, were not one but many Jonathans. Some older, their faces lined with decades he had not lived. Others younger, eyes sharp and hungry. One bore scars, twisting his smile into a sneer. Another's skin was pale and corpse-like, his mouth filled with too many teeth. They moved with him at first, until they did not. One lingered a moment longer when he turned his head. One smiled when he did not. His breath caught. The reflections pressed their hands against the surface. The liquid trembled. One stepped forward. Its fingers broke through, dripping blackness, followed by a face, his own face yet wrong. The eyes too steady, the smile too deliberate. Jonathan tried to retreat, but his body refused him. His limbs belonged to another will. The reflection leaned closer, lips moving in unison with his, but the words spoken were not his own. "You have opened the way." The voice reverberated inside his skull. The villagers ceased their chant. Silence fell heavy as stone. All eyes turned toward him as the reflection pulled free of the mirror, dripping with darkness. Jonathan screamed, but the sound was swallowed. The other Jonathan, calm, assured, smiling, stepped onto the earth as the original felt himself collapsing inward, his vision splitting into shards of mirrored glass. When he woke, he was back in his study at Arkham. Papers littered the desk, rain tapped at the window. For a moment, he dared to believe it had been a dream. But then he saw it. The mask, resting upon his desk, damp, its expression twisted in that same grimace. Or was it a grin? Jonathan stumbled to the mirror above the fireplace. His reflection met his gaze, weary, pale, drawn. Relief rose, until the reflection's lips curled into a smile his own face did not mirror. Jonathan Hale did not scream. He could not.